I'm just going to stand a bit because I had an ill-advised late coffee in the afternoon. I'm really excited to be here. I didn't know I'd be doing something on AI. I'm actually not really that AI-oriented before this, but I was experiencing something in my social and professional life in the last year and a half, and that was I would go to work meetings, and there was a bunch of really amazing queer and trans entrepreneurs that were using AI in really interesting ways. And they were using it to advance their mission and their values, and doing so thoughtfully and creatively. And then I'd be going to parties and pubs and coffee shops, and my friends would say, I am never using it. And then I would ask them, do you have a phone? They say yes, and I go, then you're using AI. It is built into everything that we're doing. What's happened recently and it's changed is that ChatGPT and other chatbots have kind of given it a personality. And that is scary to me in a lot of ways. But it's really kind of brought it to the public attention a little bit more. What I'm worried is going to happen is that this technology is going to march on. That this technology, like social media, like early days of the internet, is going to come towards us anyway, and it's going to be the systems in which we rely upon as organizations, as leaders. But we are not going to have the skill set, we are not going to have the willingness to lean into these conversations to help shape them. And so we will once again be on the end of tech oligarchs who are deciding what bias in those systems look like, what's the impact on us. And so here's my request to you. I have huge reservations around AI. I have environmental concerns, I have creative concerns, I have copyright concerns, I have economic concerns. Whatever those are, let's take the next hour and let's be as open as we can. It doesn't mean we're going to change your opinion. It doesn't mean anything like that. Let's just embrace curiosity for as long as we can with this conversation. And I think then we'll be in a much better place if we're able to do that as a community. But like I said, I am not the expert, and I am lucky enough to know many experts now, some for a long time and some more recent. So I'm joined by 3 panelists today, and the first one I'm going to introduce is Myrna Bittner. So Myrna is the founder and CEO of Run With It Synthetics, a women-led and award-winning Indigenous business pioneering synthetic data and generative modeling since 2014. She builds advanced population-scale simulations to help governments and organizations understand the future impacts of today's choices on health, equity, housing, economics, and planetary resilience. Incredibly cool, incredibly thoughtful work, and one of the most values-aligned companies I've ever interacted with, and we've just been in communication the last 6 months or so, and I've just been so impressed. Next up, we have Naufal Testowny. Thank you, Naufal. Naufal is the co-founder and CEO of Queer Tech, an organization reshaping Canada's tech ecosystem to ensure queer professionals can thrive, drawing on experiences across ASEC, Microsoft, Montreal startup sector. He brings a sharp lens on inclusive leadership, community-powered innovation, and the human side of technological change. He's also like a great coffee date for anyone that's interested. I just experienced this, so where we talked about AI a little bit beforehand, and I just learned so much. And Dr. André dos Santos. Dr. André is the principal of responsible AI at the Alberta Motors Association and the founder of Explain AI, where he helps organizations adopt AI ethically and effectively. With a PhD in computer science and a history of leadership at Amy, he's known for making complex AI concepts accessible, practical, and grounded in real-world impact. So I'm really privileged that in my job, I get to encounter brilliant creative people all the time, and these 3 are no exceptions. So thank you very much for joining us. So how this is going to work, I'm going to have a seat briefly. I can feel the coffee wearing off. I'm going to ask a few starter questions in here, but then I want to give lots of time for people to ask questions on their own. One of the things I would recommend is lead with curiosity and recognize that there are no dumb questions with AI. That there's questions that I know now the answers to, that it's because when André and I worked at the Alberta Motors Association, I would knock on his door and be like, is this a thing that's real? Are they going to take over? When is it going to happen? And anyway, so please ask lots of questions. But to get us started, I'm going to start with Naufal. How are you thinking about AI in your work right now? And what's one thing you wish more people understood about it?
A lot of time, so we think a lot about AI, we think about technology, because that's what it is. But I think it's more than that, right? I think AI is not only a technology solution or challenge today. I think it's becoming also a social and economic concept that we need to think about, because AI is moving beyond just the technology. It's reshaping the way we do work, the way we do anything that we do in our lives. So, right, every app, every solution that we use is using AI, and so I think we need to think about it bigger than just technology. And the reason I say that, it's because a lot of time when I talk with like the queer tech community, people would say, well, I'm not really in tech, or I'm not really a product manager. And my question to them is like, well, what do you think AI is? Because it's not just a technology problem today. So each one of us it goes beyond that, and I think each one of us need to think about it from a larger perspective. And I think every person in this room can contribute to that conversation, because again, it goes beyond just the technology issue that it might create or the technology solution. It's also a social justice problem. It's an economic problem. It goes beyond that. And so I think whatever the field of work you're in, AI is coming to it. And I think it's be good to contribute to the conversation. It's also nascent in age, and I think this is the opportunity for us as a community to come together and have those conversations, right? And I think we have an opportunity to shape what AI could be that maybe we did not have a chance to do with the internet or with social media.
Myrna, same question. How are you thinking about AI right now? And what do you wish people knew?
Oh, I have so many thoughts. For me, I get put into all kinds of rooms where people are terrified, where people are leaning in, where people are giving it, all of their hopes and dreams, and trying to navigate and help people understand, what artificial intelligence is, what makes it artificial, what makes it intelligent, who it can see, who it can't see, the role that we play. People say humans in the loop, and I say humans are the loop. And so, I liken it to paper, and to say paper can do all kinds of amazing things. There can also be terrifying things that paper are written on paper. There can be amazing things that paper is used to convey. Paper can be art. Paper can be danger. Paper can be threatening. And it all depends on what, we see the opportunity being and how we decide that we need to approach it. And the rules that we get to say that artificial intelligence needs to follow whenever it's deployed, and why it's deployed, and how we should be participating in that conversation, I think, constantly, is, those questions need to be asked, because otherwise it will manipulate us. It does constantly, and so I think that's, one of the things that I think about is whenever I look at a search result, and I go, well, what's it feeding me today? How many ads does it want me to see? How frustrated does it want me to be? Who is paying to be elevated in this search blank? These are questions that we should never stop asking, because if we do, then we just become a consumer of it, and it actually will consume us.
Thanks, Myrna. I was thinking about our conversations that we had early on. So we shared kind of not office space, but kind of worked near each other for a little while, and we had these coffee conversations. And one of the first things that André told me was that it's AI is a reflection of us. Like, it is not this alien thing that is kind of inventing it. It is actually like our activity online. It is, so all of the biases that exist in AI really exist kind of within us. And then it's our job to kind of understand what is our role in fixing some of that bias when we know it's systematized in that way. But with that in mind, André, do you want to talk about kind of how you're thinking about AI and technology in general?
Sure. Where to start? I think at work, two main things are AI is a journey, it's not a destination point. You just not get AI and you're done. And that's something that on this work environment, you have to remind people that you're not just done with AI, you just don't get a product. Because many things change, not as a society, we change, we evolve. But AI, new technologies and new threats also show up with as AI evolves. The other one that is, of course, comes a lot is the challenge of the human value, as like AI is replacing people, and companies that are actually seeking to replace people. Then I don't need to say that that's not a good thing, and it's not even economically feasible. It's not a great start. But one issue now is still at the work environment is that AI is operating at an investment level, is accessible right now, is cheaper than it should be, right? Because there's investment, there's a lot of hype. This AI bubble is true to some extent. It's something that we'll discuss later, but there's a lot of investment because companies are trying to get a market share. It's like, use our AI, right? And then it's not going to stay as cheap for forever. And if all your services now depend on this one AI solution, for instance, that might become a risk in the future.
And just to make sure folks are understanding, like, the idea of a bubble is just that there's some inflated value in that market, in the same way that there was in like a .com crash, that there's a flurry of investors being like, this is the future, but there's not always enough there to justify that the market is going to meet that amount of value. Sorry, please.
Correct. Yeah, exactly that. And the other question is, what was the other part? It was
I think just what is the thing that you'd want?
Oh yeah, people
this
want
audience
to know.
of like primarily like queer and trans entrepreneurs and folks working in that ecosystem. What would you want them to know about AI?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think you brought the point that AI is a reflection of us at a certain time, right? And especially those pre-trained models, they're huge. They're trained on a lot of information, data, books, legally or not, but as human content that was once available. We changed a lot, and that's a good thing. So identifying bias is an important part, because bias will never be truly removed from AI. And there's even some experiments. I don't know if you heard one. That one is that there's an AI model. I have to remember the paper that was made to love owls. Love owls. Knew everything about owls, from how they, all these different species, what they eat. And the same AI model knew a lot about accounting as well. And there was a knowledge transfer of accounting from the one model to a second model. They only transfer knowledge about accounting. And as the second model was then later asked about animals, what was its favorite animal? Of course, we can all guess what was its favorite animal. Owls. How? Not necessarily understand, because there's an underlying connection there. That's why we call black box models, that makes so many connections that it's beyond the human comprehension. And they're not necessarily true. They're not necessarily a causation item. They are they're a distortion of true causation. And finally, that's what I think I'd like people to know, is that AI is more than generative AI. Generative AI is a compilation of many technologies that exist within deep learning, that exist within machine learning, that exist within AI. But through all those layers, we have different solutions. And many of those, before even get to generative AI, before the famous ChatGPT, solutions that can help society, and especially queer and queer community. And AI get a bad reputation and is not unfounded, but there are good things we can do with artificial intelligence beyond generative AI.
I feel like some of it is a reflection also of the primary actors that we're like currently being ruled by, and those are the primarily people that are determining what the future of AI looks like, which is primarily Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Sam Altman, not of the queer community, from what I understand. Not that that is everything, but I think that's part of the fear too. Certainly that I feel around this is that it's a how much power are we willing to give up kind of around this without us knowing. And so thinking about bias in AI, it does feel like an abstract concept, right? It feels like something that just kind of happens, but what is the real world implications of having bias in AI? Why would that matter to my, my 8-year-old son or my 72-year-old mother? Myrna, do you want to start with this?
So, to give an example, I heard recently there was somebody who I was meeting with who announced that they have removed bias from AI. And it's like that's a great pitch. And so I was really curious, so I asked a lot of questions about how, because I think, bias is in all of us, and whether we know it or not, and we carry it or not. But the bias that I'm most concerned about in AI is the bias of the loudest voices who are there creating it. It is the bias of the systems that gather the data that's being consumed and trained on. And an example being when you look at health data, what is and isn't consumed in a patient record. How many people have thought their doctors got it wrong, have been misdiagnosed, have not been compliant with the medication they've been prescribed, have never gone back, have gone to a different doctor to get a second opinion and follow their advice instead. All of these things, we assume a patient record, for example, in health is valid. A patient record is created under strict rules in formats, even more restricted formats now that they're being digitized because doctors are having to conform to forms that don't allow them to describe even certain things that they've noticed about patients in more qualitative respects. So there is so much that even when you think of something like a health record, that should be, you think there's temperatures and there's measurements and there's medications and there's diagnoses, don't exist, and the bias is there. Think of all the things you have and haven't shared with your doctor. They don't see you. And yet health and health data are being used to train artificial intelligence. That's being used to inform system access. That's being used to inform drug reimbursement plans. That's being used to inform politicians and policies. So it's like, how far up the chain when you look at bias does it go? And it starts, with the things that AI doesn't see, the things that AI doesn't know that it doesn't see, and the things that people are creating it that they don't know, that they can't see either. And so I think that's a big part for me, is about making those conscious choices to ask those questions about what is visible, because that's what you will see, on the other side.
I think about this too. I mean, I went from seeing a doctor as an AMAB person, a person who was born male, and then went through a gender transition and a gender-affirming surgery, and now I'm on estradiol and progesterone and all these things. And my doctor experience kind of went from, we've solved all of your health problems and you don't need to worry, to a shrug emoji. They just don't know much about women. They don't know much about trans women. They don't know much about people that aren't cis, white, and straight. And so if you imagine that scaling, I promise I'm not meant to frighten you before we kind of send you off for the day. But that also keeps me up at night, is the idea of my experience being scaled in that way.
Just on the bias item, like removing bias is interesting because bias is literally a measurement of AI, the bias variance measurement. If you really don't have AI that is really perfect. You don't have AI, you have an equation model, right? You depend on the AI to generalize in order to be an AI. So bias will exist no matter what. That's for sure. And then because there's two bias, this bias of generalization and the bias that we have as a society. And in academia, this bias is divided in many ways, like each academic measure in different areas of data. But as we're talking about the queer community, once I was presenting as a AI for medical association, student medical association, and the topic was AI. I was talking about ethics in AI. And a question, someone asked, how do you deal with data that do not reflect reality? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, as someone says they're from a gender, but their bodies do not reflect that. And you can see that the intention was not really a positive intention. It was not like from the point of curiosity, but from point of transphobia. And I think at the time I was not as composed. But anyway, my point was that comment showed up, and my answer was something that, well, trans people, if there's anyone that's self-aware of their body, is trans folks. They are the ones that they have this notion that trans folks are trying to trick other people as they do it for fun, or like if there's anyone in this planet that is self-aware of the body, it's trans people, and they need access to health. If anything, a comment like that shows that we need more research and more studies on the trans bodies so we can properly address those concerns of gender that is connected to the bodies that the trans bodies. So we still have to deal with bias through that level, which happens through the data, but also the interpretation of data. And that's another challenge, because as you mentioned, the way data is interpreted, like the way we see the data and present that, because we have politicians using AI to inform themselves, could also be tricky, because then you can make an AI that omits some parts or talks about different items.
And just to add to that, 51% of the population is women, and we're severely underrepresented in health data. So it's not that it's, and we're considered overcomplicating.
The best way.
Yeah. So I think about bias. There's bias in general in our society. We just talked. I think society has been built by the patriarchy. Cisgender men have ruled the world and have been in position of power, and they've built the world from that perspective. I mean, the bathrooms we use, the lighting in the streets, all of it was built from that perspective. So the built world around us is already extremely biased to the other half of the population that exists in the world. Now, we talk about AI. There is generative AI, which is 3 years old, and then there is machine learning, deep learning, and AI that existed since the end of the 50s. The bias in technology we've already seen the ramification of it on communities like us, right? Your credit card rate, your mortgage rate has been decided by an AI in the past. Before generative AI even started, they were already being biased towards it, right? Your insurance premiums have been also decided by AI. So we've been impacted by AI. Generative AI in the conversation today is the first time where actually we have a consumer product where all of us now see that bias, but have an opportunity to have conversation around that bias. And right now, the AI is using the data that exists out there. It's looking at our history, it's looking at all the things that humanity does, and then it processes that information. And so what it's happening is it's recycling that information. And I think there is a huge opportunity to balance that bias, but there's a lot of work that we need to do. And I think that's where also I see the opportunity of having that conversation as a society.
Can I do 5 minutes? Okay, can we do one more quick question, and then we still have time for audience after that?
15 minutes at the end for questions.
Okay, perfect. So we have another 5. Yeah, perfect. So I'm trying to end my questions a little bit on a hopeful note, not to put my thumb on the scale. We can talk dystopian kind of all day with this stuff. But if there's a value or a principle, so if AI reflects what we value in some way, it's a reflection of who we are, what is one value or principle that you'd want kind of baked into those systems if you could kind of wave a magic wand? And the second part of this question is someone doing this well? Like, is there an organization? Is there a business? Is there a consortium that is doing that well? So what is the principle that you'd want to take forward in those systems, and who's an example of a positive actor in this space? Sure, that'd be great.
I don't know if it's more of a value, but for me, we need to take a human-centric approach to technology. It's the people who develop the technology. It's not going to develop itself. And I know there is all kind of version of the future where AI can take the word, or it's going to make us better, or all the things. I think at the end of the day, we need to take a human-centric approach to the development of AI. I think we need to build companies, and technology companies specifically need to build inclusive spaces and diverse teams so we can build. So all the bias we talk about is getting treated from the source where the technology is built, and making sure that we are the voices of the people in all communities are heard in that. And I think there is a big opportunity to do that, but it's going to require us to work together as society to make that happen.
Do you want me to talk about run with it?
I would love for you to talk about run with it.
So my company is a rather unique company. I like to think we are working extremely hard to build a human-centric universe that informs and creates and crafts and validates and works with communities to develop AI for them that solves for complexity, that helps them see forward, that makes intersectionality extraordinarily visible for them to be able to use strategically. My company happens to be 70% women. We are Indigenous led, and we have a capital partner that's an impact fund. We have gone about artificial intelligence extraordinarily differently. We're GBA Plus certified, everybody in our company. We are working our way towards being 100% OCAP certified, which is Indigenous principles around data sovereignty, ownership, control, access, and possession, as well as care data principles. So these are things that when you intentionally create artificial intelligence and generative AI from those principles for those communities, with the participation of those communities, you end up in extraordinary rooms where you are have the privilege of rematriating data, of collecting it from sources where it's being held and has been held, where you can work with those communities to actually correct that data with their participation and for their use. And I think that understanding of the role with which and the care with which you can develop artificial intelligence under those guiding principles, that's what gives me hope. Is it can be done. It's not perfect in practice, but it's an object that's under construction and constant conversation. And I think that's something that we should be requesting from others, who we allow their artificial intelligence to guide our lives as well.
Okay, magic wand. If I could do something, is class consciousness. If you can put that in AI and everyone, that will solve a lot of the problems. If if it's embedded and we all understand how our work and how we society, integrate, because there's a source of all evil, which doesn't need to be mentioned, but that will be my goal. And another my magic The other thing is, we don't need to be there. Like as I said at the beginning, people need to be part of the conversation because it's not there. We're already here. We're already part of this conversation. AI is already being used. As I said, if you use a phone, cell phone, it's AI. Your microwave as AI to an extent. That technology is already there. What has been democratized is access to generative AI. But AI is in general, the knowledge is here, and we can do so much with that. And we see examples for career tech, like new companies that are using it. So it comes from us in the same way that geopolitical items that are happening, where we can use the power of people, like boycotting. We can use the same with AI, as putting the value where it needs to be. Where it needs to be. As a group, we have this power to act together, to organize, and make the change.
Yeah, I want to add quickly one more thing also, because I talked about the human-centric approach. For those who don't know Queer Tech, we're an organization that supports the queer community in the tech industry. And one of the things we're doing to that human-centric approach is also launch an initiative called the QT Inclusive AI. And really what we are trying to do is be that voice of the queer community to the tech companies. One of the goals we have is like working with our community, people in this room and people who are part of the queer tech community, to decide what do we want AI to be? If we talk about inclusive AI, what does that mean, and what does that mean for our community? And then how do we hold the companies accountable to the values that we uphold, right? And that can be by knowing the software that you use or the AI programs that you use, are they causing harm when you're using them? None of us don't know. Maybe environment is one of the challenges we know, but beyond that, we have no idea what's in these algorithms. We don't know the harm that they are causing, and I think that's also work that we can do as a community, as a society, to make sure that we know, so then we can make a choice to use which algorithm or which company or which solution that we want to use.
Yeah, I think, and you and I had this conversation very briefly about this, but another one that we know about is cognitive decline, for lack of a better word. Like Microsoft did that big study where like there's a bunch of people that all of a sudden had access to, they were offloading mental tasks to AI, and their ability to do creative reasoning and those things went down. And our systems just aren't very fast. And so one of the things that Naufal and I talked about is, my worry is we're going to be a lost generation. I think we eventually figure this out. I think like the environmental thing eventually gets figured out. I think the cognitive thing gets eventually figured out, and school changes and it adapts, and this looks very old, but can we do it in time? So thank you very much for the conversation here. I want to open it up, just make sure that we have time for questions. Oh, perfect, there's a floating mic. Okay, great. Does anyone have questions? We have a person in the back.
Hello? Okay, there. First off, thank you all for appearing, and I've sent a connection request to at least some of you, and I'd like to speak to you later on about bias. What I'd like to ask you about is frankly about the term AI, because I have a personal problem with it. I write quite extensively on the topic, and I refuse to use the term. I use either LLM or pattern matching model for anything I refer to. And the reason I do that specifically is largely connected to a piece of research I read earlier this year on the psychology of LLMs and AIs. And what it was researchers essentially advocating for marketers to reinforce and use the term AI because it had magic connotations of a machine that was going to do everything for you and automatically help to bypass level 2 thinking. What do all of you think on the ethics of AI as a term, because it is an inaccurate term?
Oh, I have so many thoughts. My company name is called Run With It Synthetics for a reason, and it's not because we have anything to do with fabric or pharmaceuticals, or I get all kinds of questions about that. In the 70s, there was a split in the artificial intelligence community, wasn't called that, but in the intelligence community, where there was a group that was called synthetic intelligence, and their pursuit was, they felt that there was so much that we needed to learn about reality that we couldn't see or understand now. And so that's the hearken I'll offer you back, is that I think there's still a lot that we don't understand about even where we are today, let alone where we're going. And it doesn't come from a certain idea or prescription of what data is, because I would even argue that data is diverse. Data is a picture, data is an emotion, data is local knowledge, data is elders, data is spirituality, and that, you know, if that boy in a bubble, as I call artificial intelligence, that restricts itself to that term, is the idea that we have that everything is going to be learned, that can be learned, exists in a very prescribed form of data, you know, then that is a really inaccurate term. And so I stick with the artificial part of it. It's artificial.
It's the intelligence layer,
Yeah. Intelligence is also a big word. And that comes from the, yeah. But yes, there's knowledge that should be, you know, that come out of it rather than just it is intelligent. Yeah. But yeah, intelligence is a big word too.
Academically speaking, again, artificial intelligence is a big umbrella term. Most of the applications we see nowadays is machine learning because it draws from data. Artificial intelligence, as a general definition, is when machines perform any human cognition behavior, and that doesn't happen necessarily from data. It could get an expert and makes a solution. If this happens, do that, and if then is also a solution, and necessarily comes from data. And there's the robotics. There's natural language area as well. So it becomes a marketing term. I don't think there's much go around, but it's still part of the same conversation on how we now productize human knowledge. Because now and that's what I say about generative AI. Generative AI is the interpolation of human knowledge, right? You think blue, I think of elephant, I can make a blue elephant. Is that new, right? And there comes the challenge. So, and just to find on time, because correlation is not necessarily causation. If you have to get anything from everything I said, correlation is not necessarily causation. So I recommend everyone to start know more about the area of causality. When you truly know through measurement, with a scientist that could put into calculus, a new calculus to measure causation, which is not easy. But it put in perspective, and if you read, it's called the Book of Why, on how we got here, because AI comes from computer science. Computer science comes from statistics, which comes from mathematics. In the end, AI is optimization. So understanding, and through history, AI had its lobby, and there's a reason things happen. So and that comes to the point of we humans have to understand ourselves first before, you know, so history doesn't repeat itself, which unfortunately happens a lot.
Can we do one more? We got 5? Now if we do want to, let's do another question. Yeah.
Hello. I have many thoughts. I will try to make it like connected. I don't know if I can make it. I was wondering, like you talked a bit about bias in AI, and it sounded like you were talking mostly about data, but I'm wondering also about like access to AI, because I know like my background is in languages, and I know like building like LLMs for smaller languages like Indigenous language is very complicated because of like the data amount and stuff like that. And then also I kind of got stuck on the human-centric approach, and I'm thinking like, can we think about it in sort of like a life-centric approach in terms of like indigenous understandings of life, like how AI is also not only impacting human life, but also like just the world, like life on Earth, especially with like building those huge data centers, et cetera, et cetera. I will leave it at that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I can start. The reason I talk about building inclusive workplaces is the start of building that technology. And I think taking, either a life-centric approach or learnings from indigenous cultures or other cultures, I think will comes from the people who sit at that table. And I think this is where, when we talk with, this first solution for us getting on the path of reducing bias from AI and building inclusive technology will start at the table of who is developing that technology. And if it's always the same group of people who come from the same school with the same skin color and the same background, well, they have so many blind spots that we've seen. And so inherently, the technology will continue to be biased and continue to only reflect the experience of that group. And so we need to go back and say, the human approach is to make sure that we are upskilling, reskilling our communities, that people know how to use AI and code AI, because the use of it is not just, oh, there is people who develop AI. I think the users also have a responsibility today, because we prompt, you're writing the prompt that use the results of it. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we build technology.
I also think one of the things I really liked about your question is this idea of human supremacy, of our knowledge of our history is what matters, when we know there's actually lots of ways of knowing outside of kind of our Western ideas of this. And I'm hopeful that actually those things, because AI, again, imperfect term, will be so marketized that there will be this other market for kind of ways of knowing that can't be done through a computer. And I am hopeful that actually it will lead to a bit of a revolution of what other ways am I understanding how I am in this room and how I am in relation to nature. Not to be too philosophical about it, but I like where your question is. Sorry, Myrna, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Who is in the room and who is creating it, and the perspective that they bring. We do a lot of work in connecting. So my company has just an extraordinary commitment towards looking at intergenerational impacts and outcomes that involve the planet and its people. And so, using artificial intelligence to be able to, and modeling to be able to connect and make those connections between the impacts and outcomes that maybe are closer to us, but are also, need to be seen from different perspectives, and need to be understood in different ways. That's, a huge part of complex de-risking and visualization that can be done, if it's done correctly, and I think is really important. And that's the role that these technologies can play for us, is to help us see farther or see through complexity and deal with that complexity that we may not be able to grasp without some help.
Just very briefly, I usually follow the OECD, the Organization for Cooperation and Economic Development, where I put people and the planet in the center for development of AI. But this synergy of people and the planet, if there's one group that is really good at combining the planet with the people, is the indigenous folks, right? Is the point of us listening to the people that are actually telling us how to do things. And then to those points, and then it's people in the center, not a one specific people, not males in the center, it's not white people in the center, right? It's people. So again, it comes to the point of AI is going to be a reflection of society. So there's a lot of work that happens to it, because AI sits on top of data governance, which is, and then before that there's the data governance, but then regulations, all of that, regulation of social media, regulation of the internet. So there's many things that comes to the AI, which is now a lot of problems surface because we haven't dealt with some issues that still exist within society.
Thank you so much. I think that might be
So there is some good news. My apologies. I can't read apparently. We have until 4:30. So
Okay, how long do we
we have 15 more minutes if we'd like to continue on
bully
questions.
us.
That is my bad and my very sincere apologies on that.
It's okay. If
Yeah,
anyone
so
was
if
like,
we want to do any more questions.
is everyone was like seething with anger and they're like, I just gotta wait 2 minutes to run out of this room? Please note, I won't be offended if that's the time now. Yeah, let's take some more questions. These are brilliant.
She frightened me. Okay, so in a world where like AI can generate like music, images, and writing, how do we ensure like cultural sovereignty? Like that's one of the biggest things in my community is navigating the safety and ownership, like over how our stories as like Black people, marginalized people, queer people, women, Black women, how our stories and sounds are used and exploited constantly over and over again. So like I use ChatGPT just like every other guy, but like I'm constantly thinking about the information that is being stored within that space being recycled in various communities and being misused furthermore in various communities that may not necessarily have the intelligence or the emotional maturity to handle or navigate the realities of our lived experiences or take advantage of them. Like where do we go with that, you know? LOL.
Many things that can be mentioned about that. Regarding art, even with using AI, there's you can use poisonous AI, where you can put AI to change slightly things. So if anyone, especially images, learn from images, they kind of messed up. It's called nightshade, for instance. There are a couple of things that come with that. Point is, we've been dealing with copyrights for a long time, right? Like the music industry, they're really good at going after people that steal information, right? For me, kind of boils down to democracy on how we, because even if you do have laws, if they're not enforced, right? I'm not gonna mention, I don't like to mention brands, but you know, if you remember, there's like a car company that knew there was an issue with the car and they let it happen and cars explode because it was easier to deal with the lawsuit than just fixing all the cars. Nothing guarantees that, you know, they are using our knowledge and putting there, and that comes to the point of us as building that space, and then there's like where this opportunity lies, right? If we now focus on queer-owned or Black-owned businesses, right? Because then we can trust. We have this trust. We should leverage that to empower those that are seeking the solutions that will enable us to do the right things without stealing our data. I think there are some solutions there, and it comes from the point of us organizing and focusing where people that are there in the space. We exist, we're here, everywhere. So we focus there. I think we might find the solutions we're seeking. I don't know if they fully put that. It's called Nightshade. So an image is RGB, red, green, blue. It's a combination of all those pixels, right? And it goes from 1 to 255. So each pixel in the image has all those numbers. So and the AI, what does it? It doesn't know there's like a cat on the image. It knows because the combination of pixels, there's a cat. So what this AI does is slightly change the pixels all the way. So when AI tries to organize, you're going to see a toilet paper rather than a cat. By using the bias of AI on how it's has learned to do that in this way, poisoning what when AI extracts information. It's a reactive solution, but it's a solution. I think we can all have this creativity, and then it's possible to do something about it, even using AI itself.
Yeah, I think in addition to technology, I think your question also is it's a policy problem, right? And it's like we have created copyright laws in the business world to govern the business and the work that people are doing and get compensated for that work. And it is the role of government to create the laws and the guardrails in place to protect its citizens. That's what democracy is law and order govern democracy, and we need to do that. And I think our government lag behind. I tell a lot of community members, if you see your work is getting used by AI and you're not compensated for it, you need to write a letter to your MPs and telling them. And everyone needs to do that because so many times people who sit in Ottawa don't hear enough of those stories, and so they don't think it's a bigger problem. They might hear it in the media, but they don't hear enough stories of the individual that their work is being stolen and the money they lose, which means the livelihood and the economic power that is getting from them. And I think that's really important to remember, that also that's the power you have between your hands, is that if your work is getting used, tell them, write those stories, because then it would force them to move that in the forefront of the agenda of creating that protection.
I would also say that it's up to us as consumers to read the fine print. And if you're going to participate, you're going to continue promoting some of those, some of those practices and be a part of that enablement. We had very early on when code completes were being released and ChatGPT and, from a corporate perspective, we were instructed by some of our clients almost immediately to have to sign legal agreements saying those technologies would never touch our computers. And the reason why is because these were big corporates, because we were dealing with their intellectual property. And if somebody, even though I'm a part of the ComSci Industry Advisory Council here at U of A, and they were like, yeah, we should be teaching code complete in our classes. And, if we had enabled that practice to go on in our company, we would have put our customers' intellectual property at risk. And so it's when the big guys, and even the big guys like AT&T and Microsoft are saying, don't you dare let those technologies touch your computer, and on the other hand, they're promoting them, it makes you think about, being a consumer of those technologies and just what you are giving away. And I think that's an important part that, like you say, the policymakers, there are also countries around the world whose governments are just vastly advanced in terms of autonomous, decision-making for consumers to be able to give their data or hold their data, to be able to say, yes, my health data can be used in a research study, and no, I've changed my mind 2 days later, and you have to remove my data from your research study. So, it's up to us, as Canadians, to be able to say, we actually have a problem, and we need you to solve it, and we need you to act quickly. And there are other countries and other examples of policy that, that would be sufficient if we would adopt them. It's a start, rather than let's take 10 more years and think about it.
I just wanted to make sure we have time for the last question. We did hear a technological response, we heard a policy response, and then we heard kind of an individual firm response kind of in relation to this. I would add one more on top, which is cultural and shame. Like, bring shame back a little bit. Like, I think what happened, and it's not a creative endeavor, but Coca-Cola always releases their holiday ad, you know what I mean? And it's meant to be all heartwarming. But they used AI this year. Turns out AI, to make the AI ad, it would cost about as much as it would to hire people to do that work and have a kind of a creative output. And people dragged Coca-Cola online. And they're like, here's all the adding wheels to the bus or to the truck. Here's the logo looking all weird. But they were shamed online. And I really am a big fan of cultural shaming in these moments, particularly towards large corporations. So maybe it's immature of me, but I think that's a layer.
Yeah, and just one thing, the fine print things is a great example where you can use AI. against AI. All the fine print in terms of reference, copy, put on ChatGPT, and my data being retained, right? No one has time to read all of that. You should be starting now fighting back with their own tools. That's just one example. Oh, and okay, just one more item is, as part of the AMA, as part of the CAA groups, we're collecting because we advocate for drivers' rights and flyers' rights. We are looking now to advocate for people's rights as well. For instance, the right to own your own image, so it doesn't show random ad, items like that, because we have legislation happening. For instance, the European Union with the AI Act, or Denmark, they already passed legislation. It's possible. And yeah, we need to talk with our MLAs because we need to put that pressure. It comes from us. That's some of the items we can do.
Next question.
We have another question? Sydney.
I'm wondering what you would want people to know before engaging with AI in ways that are like emotional or therapeutic, and specifically thinking about this from a queer lens. There might be folks who are more comfortable saying I'm gay or I'm trans, typing that into ChatGPT, and not comfortable telling a person yet. And I'm just wondering obviously that's a big topic, but if you had one thing you would want people to consider before using AI in that way, what would it be?
Can I kick this off with the story I mentioned? Yeah. This is really personal and kind of embarrassing. I was in therapy and my therapist suggested what you need to do is be tracking kind of how you're at somatically kind of throughout the day. And so she recommended this app, which is entirely grant funded, so I don't have to pay for it. It's called How Do You Feel? And there's a feature in it that says, do you want to use AI or do you not want to use AI? And what it is, it prompts you throughout the day and it says, how are you feeling? Where are you feeling that in your body? Some basic things, some journal things. But one of the things that it asks you after you've put in kind of what you're doing and how you're feeling, it goes, hey, do you want to go deeper? And when I hit that button, because I was curious, it's asking me really damn thoughtful questions. And it's all of a sudden I'm in the middle of not a therapy session, but I'm talking to a friend. And it was so quick, and what scared me about it is how much it's like Google Maps is what I call it, that's head to Nelful, where I know that Google is tracking me, but it's not worth me going back to carrying around paper maps. I feel better this week engaging with it a handful of times, and it's really useful. So now I got to go do the research of where's the data being stored? Who has access to that? What happens if it gets out? What's their security like? But my worry isn't that it's not going to work. It's that it's going to work so well that people are just going to go, I'll take the risk anyway. I'm going to hand over all of my stuff over to Google or these things. And I happen to trust this particular app, but I just thought it was blown away by the ease of it, and the effectiveness of it was kind of off-putting in this way. Sorry, please.
My first question is how old is that person? Because in my opinion, if you are under 18, you should not be able to input that in a model. It's unpredictable. We don't know what it's telling the person, and we have seen the horror that an algorithm can cause harm, extreme harm to the person that's using it. I think if you're above 18, you're able to rationalize more, and I think there is an opportunity to ask the models, but it's not the best place to also have those conversations. And I think as long as people also are aware that these models are still toddlers. They're 3 years old. Probably 3 years old, if you told them I'm queer, they'll just look at you and smile and don't understand what to do. This model can cause harm, right? It can depend, again, how you phrase it and stuff. It can take the person into a path that's not healthy. And I think that risk, for me, is not acceptable when it starts to lead to individual harm.
I don't know if I have much to add, except knowing that you're an appropriate age, and that you have awareness about where that data is going, and how it can be used. And I come from corporate, and also if that data is housed or kept or preserved by that company, and that company is transacted. You look at something like Ancestry and Me, where we were all yay, who am I related to? And, And then suddenly, you realize that that DNA is now, they've copyrighted it and they're transacting it, and they're transacting your data. And so, that's also to me a big concern. But I do agree there's incredible benefits and can be, especially for having those conversations, but just care.
I'll be a little more polemic. I don't have an issue with age. I think I have an issue with purpose. We do allow kids to watch Cocomelon. You know what I mean? It's just, if you build those apps, they can build, because there's this layer of privacy, understand that data is not going to be retained or not. Let's say it's all safe. It's not going to be retained. Okay, we trust. Then we go to the point of the purpose. Who is building that? And that's the point of, we have an issue nowadays of against people, the experts, of not trusting universities, not trusting doctors, not trusting the people that knows. And we've been doing that. Like, how do I know this building is not going to fall over my head, or my cell phone is not going to explode? We trust people because I don't know how to build a cell phone, but I know it's going to work. In the same way, who is building that? If it is with a psychologist for that purpose, it's possible. Even for the younger age, if it's done with a person out of the area. I think it comes again from the perspective of, why are people going to ChatGPT for seeking help? Is because our youth is being stressed a lot on the lack of, perspective. I think it's a symptom of a society we live in, and where we need to, be more welcoming on with that. I think ChatGPT, for some people, helps a lot. For some people, not. So I think then it comes from us as a society to find solutions where we accommodate those items. And of course, we've seen a lot of the bad examples. And yes, the big corporations will try to retain and get more money out of it, but it's possible to find, I think, solutions that are catered to the queer community. It's just not going to happen by itself. There is an incentive. We need to find the right people. But as long as properly sourced, I'll be okay with that.
I think just one thing to add, so let's think about the question, if I go to a therapist and I engage with that person, the basics are covered, right? We go because this person is certified, they've had the education, there is a body that have confirmed they've received that education, and they are qualified to do the work. Right now, the algorithms we use, there's no certification to them. So in addition to the privacy issues that we still have with this algorithm, because the laws and the policies are not in place to protect that, the trust also is not there yet, right? We are still not very trusting, and I think everyone in this room who've used this algorithm have seen the algorithms hallucinate and give them wrong information, right? And so there is still a lot of trust that also we need to build before that. And I think that will take time once we have the certification in place that can also give us that trust in those algorithms.
Online therapy is not new. I study at the University of Regina, Saskatchewan, where I started my master's and PhD. But they had already have online therapy for the longest time. So as long as it's grounded on research, right? And that's the point of who is actually bringing that to us, right? Is it a corporation looking for money, or is that research, is scientists that study and see the impact of that? So this online therapy existed way before large language models became a thing.
So I think that's our time now. So thank you very much. I do want to just say in closing, as we become more digital and more AI focused and those sort of things, this stuff matters more to me. The in-person, the trust that we feel, the connections that you make, the emotional, and any future that has more of this, has more curiosity and more empathy, I'm for. And so thank you very much to all of you for representing that curiosity and empathy. And thank you to our panel, Naufal, Myrna, Andre. Thank you very much for answering so thoughtfully and sharing your knowledge with us. I would recommend that you follow Queer Tech. If you look up Run With It. Andre, can you name again what's the company?
Explain AI.
Explain AI, that you join the chamber, the Alberta 2S LGBTQI+ chamber, and that you can come talk to us afterwards. But thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay.